The horror genre has often used books and novels as a source of inspiration as long as film has existed. One of the first American horror movies ever made was an adaptation of Frankenstein by Thomas Edison. In the 30s, there was Dracula, Frankenstein, The Invisible Man, The Phantom of the Opera, all Universal classics as we know them today. In the 70s, there was Jaws, The Amityville Horror, The Exorcist, and in the 80s, they attempted to adapt a psychological thriller for the screen. And it bombed bad. So bad that executive producer Dino De Laurentiis decided he did not want to adapt the sequel. Big mistake. The sequel was a very popular book and led to a bidding war. Jodie Foster tried to buy the rights, but found out Gene Hackman beat her to the punch. Hackman bought the rights because he wanted to play the male lead, but he eventually decided to turn down the part, fearing that it was too dark. Nobody was prepared for how big this movie would be. They weren't prepared for the box office. They weren't prepared for the overwhelmingly positive critical reception. And they were not prepared for the rare award wins. Nobody was ready for Silence of the Lambs. Based on the novel by Thomas Harris, Clarice Starling is an FBI trainee who's assigned to interview Hannibal Lecter, infamous serial killer and cannibal, to see what he knows about an uncaught serial killer known as Buffalo Bill. Buffalo Bill has just kidnapped a senator's daughter, so the race is on. Lecter tells Starling that he will tell her what he knows in exchange for information on her past.
Quid pro quo. I tell you things, you tell me things. Not about this case, though. About yourself.
I feel like in order to fully dive into this and dive into why this movie was so huge and has such a cultural impact, it's important to understand a few things. We have to talk about the era, the pop culture, the pop psychology, and the LGBTQ community. Being a straight white man with a beard who talks about movies on the internet, obviously I'm the right person for this job. So, what is pop psychology? Pop psychology was a wave in the 80s where a bunch of psychologists and psychiatrists got famous and they would go on talk shows, they would have their own shows, they would write books, and they basically became celebrities for being psychologists and psychiatrists. One of the great examples is Dr. Ruth. She was a sex psychiatrist or sex psychologist and would do just that. She'd go on talk shows and talk about sex and why people are hung up on it.
As if it doesn't exist, except maybe for having babies.
Right.
But not for pleasure.
It did a lot of damage to the idea of psychiatry because suddenly it was everywhere. And it really kind of enforced this idea that if you do psychiatry, if you see a shrink, talk to somebody, then there is something wrong with you. Obviously, that's not true, and unfortunately, that is a stigma that still continues to this day.
His pulse never got above 85, even when he ate her tongue.
The reason I bring all this up in a movie about the 90s is because the book was written in 88, and it is an adaptation of the book. While it makes some changes to try and streamline things, it is a fairly decent adaptation.
It rubs the lotion on its skin. It does this whenever it's told.
Something that I was kind of curious about revisiting this movie with was the character of James Gumb, aka Buffalo Bill. A lot of the movie, they don't know why he's kidnapping women, why he's killing them, why he's skinning them. Hannibal knows, and he's telling Clarice, as well as the audience, he's getting them to figure it out, that he's trying to make a suit out of women's skin. This is nothing new. This was inspired by Ed Gein, the Butcher of Plainfield, who inspired Psycho and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and all sorts of works. He kind of gained notoriety because he was one of the first big serial killers that got national attention.
There's no correlation in the literature between transsexualism and violence. Transsexuals are very passive.
A lot of people look at Buffalo Bill and they go, oh, well, he's a transsexual. The movie takes great pains to tell you he is not a transsexual. He thinks he is. He's thought he's other things before. This is just another thing for him to want to be, to try and find his place. He is not actually wanting to be a woman. He does not think he is a woman in a man's body. He just wants this suit so he can try to fit in.
Billy hates his own identity, you see, and he thinks that makes him a transsexual.
Also, if I use any wrong terms at this, I'm sorry. I really mean no offense. I'm talking about these things as I see them relate to the movie. I'm not trying to offend. Please do not cancel me before I get famous.
Billy is not a real transsexual, but he thinks he is. He tries to be.
The first time we see Lecter, he is behind glass or plastic. A lot of it was because the director didn't want to deal with shooting through bars any more than he had to. But it creates another feeling. As we're watching Lecter, we realize he is the only one in this institution who is framed this way. Everybody else is behind bars. We're given the same impression that we would going to the zoo. And suddenly it clicked that this is just another visual storytelling element of Lecter is a dangerous animal. And the only thing that's protecting Clarice is this glass. The only thing that protects you is the glass and the screen.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
A lot has been said about Jodie Foster's performance, about Anthony Hopkins' performance, but I feel like Ted Levine and Scott Glenn get the short end of the stick. They are throughout this movie, and they give great performances. Ted Levine plays Buffalo Bill. He's given a rather thankless task of he has to be this being that everybody talks about that is scary, but you're told more about him than you see. And this works to the film's advantage because when you see him, there's a brief moment where he can be charming and get help, and then it flickers away and he's scary again. Scott Glenn plays Jack Crawford, the head of the FBI. He's the one who gives Clarice the assignment. He is authoritative. We buy him in this role, and we know what Clarice wants. If she succeeds, then when she graduates, she gets a job with Jack.
Cops look at you to see how to act. Matters.
Point taken.
With that one little bit that he's not a man who is stuck in time. He is willing to do things to change to try to fit in with a better future. This whole movie is about evolution. We see Jack trying to evolve into a more modern man. We see Clarice trying to evolve from trainee to FBI agent. James Gumb is trying to evolve to his next state. There's the use of the moth. It evolves from larva to chrysalis to moth.
I called Senator Ruth Martin. She never heard of any deal with you.
This movie came out and it did extremely well critically. There was only one famous critic who gave it a negative review, and that was Gene Siskel. This movie released February 14th, 1991, and when the Oscars rolled around the next year in 92, this movie swept the Big Five. And it's rare for a movie to be remembered 6 months later when it comes time for the Oscars. So for it to be remembered a whole year later is astounding. This was the first movie that won Best Picture, and it was already out on home video. When I say it won the Big Five, it won Best Picture, Best Actress, Best Actor, Best Director, and Best Screenplay. Director Jonathan Demme uses all sorts of little tricks to put you in Clarice's shoes. A lot of the characters talk like this to the camera, and they don't break eye contact with the camera lens, so that way you, the viewer, are Clarice. Then, when the movie cuts to Clarice, she's off center a little bit. She's still talking to the camera here and there, as if continuing the conversation with the person she's talking to, but it's not the exact same thing. And then it cuts back to who's talking to her.
And
I have only seen this movie a handful of times. I think this was like my fourth or fifth viewing of the movie. I've owned it for years. This was one of the first few Blu-rays that I bought. I got it at Menards for like $10 on Blu-ray, and I said, sure, why not? The majority of the times I've watched it, it's been this Blu-ray copy. It's not a movie that I go back to often, but if you were to ask me, hey, what do you think about this movie? I'd say, hey, yeah, it's a great movie. First time I saw it, I was 10 or 11. Hannibal was coming out, the sequel, and I kept getting the preview for it. I really wanted to see it. My mom said, well, you can't see Hannibal until you see Silence of the Lambs. Cool. Can I see Silence of the Lambs then? No. No. That movie will mess you up. And eventually she said, yeah, all right, fine. But we don't own it. I was going through VHSs in the basement one day, and I found a tape that had a bunch of movies on it from Showtime or HBO. Side note, drop it in the comments. Did anybody else's parents have a bunch of tapes with movies they recorded off of Showtime and HBO? I feel like that's such a 90s kid thing. Anyway, I sat down, I watched it, I got done, and I went, this this is the movie I'm supposed to be terrified of? This is the movie that's gonna keep me awake for days? What? I didn't get the movie. Like, as a kid, I thought, yeah, no, I understand it, but I didn't understand all the complex layers to it. As an adult rewatching it, I'm going, wow, this is better than I thought. It is just under 2 hours. I believe the movie is an hour and 58 minutes, and it flies by. You don't even realize it's like 45 minutes until you meet Buffalo Bill, or 30 minutes until you meet Hannibal Lecter. You're just in it, and it is good. It is cozy.
love your suit.
The movie just feels like a warm, lazy Sunday afternoon where you've got a roast in the oven, you're folding laundry, and you've got a movie on TV while you're doing all these things. It's honestly a relaxing movie, and I highly recommend it. When I did the Jaws review, I said there's only a handful of perfect movies. Whether this is a perfect movie or not, it's pretty close.
I do wish we could chat longer, but I'm having an old friend for dinner.
I would be very curious to see this get a critical reevaluation with today's lens and see how people who are a part of the LGBTQ community respond to Buffalo Bill and how they treat his visibility and what it means for representation. So, check it out.